Don't go there.
You are a technocrat. I mean, you can speak to whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate for that to occur. Would you have done that as a permanent secretary?
Politicians get the information from wherever source that they can.
That's going to be the extent of your answer.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
There's a lot of noise around the data protection bill that, in my respectful view, is not warranted.
I was one of those making noise, and it's simply because I was concerned about that specific section 33.
Don't go there.
Are you going to be offering yourself up as political leader of the party?
I see you've called me have a much more than diplomatic passports. I don't mind that.
Don't go there.
What is the relationship like between you and your leader, Dr. Mitchell, your boss, Dr. Mitchell?
I'm not sure how to explain how to answer this question at this time. I prefer not to answer.
Don't go there.
They said that you approached the bank for the loan before the election and that it only materialized after the election. There are also conflicting reports around the quantity of monies that were received. What is the reality here?
People try to extort the truth and to make all kinds of things about it. I just stay quiet. So if you notice, I was really and truly quiet about the whole matter.
Well, except with not with the New Today newspaper. The New Today newspaper reported on this, so I'm not sure you were quiet on this. Go ahead, Honorable. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to answer your question, right?
Don't go there.
I think we just spoke at length about the regularization framework. So
yes, we did. But let us talk, Prime Minister. Let us talk about the workers who are dismissed.
The Bubb Report. We go there.
Hello, everyone. A pleasant good morning to our viewers and listeners, and we welcome you to this week's edition of the Bubb Report. I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bubb. Now, we begin this week's program by paying tribute to the late Roy Cape, the Reverend Trinidadian saxophonist who provided the musical backdrop for generations of regional performers, who died last week, Thursday, at the age of 82, leaving the calypso and soca and music fraternity in grief. Reports suggest he suffered a fatal stroke that morning. Cape also had been struggling with cancer for many years. Now, in an era when the term icon can be frivolously bandied about, Dr. Roy Cape earned himself the title. His peers said, quote, he lived for music, unquote. His protégés recalled his magnetic personality. Everyone agreed he was a genuinely good guy, always with a smile on his face and an outstretched helping hand. Now fondly known as Pappy, Cape was a cultural institution in Trinidad and Tobago, as well as throughout the Caribbean region. When Steel Talks, a website dedicated to steel pan music and history, once noted, quote, if you remove Roy Cape from the timeline, his significant and global impact to date on pan culture, the art form and music world in general, would be voided. And all that exists because of his interactions would never have been, unquote. Cape's journey towards music, specifically calypso and soca music, began when he was a boy, growing up in East Port of Spain, where there were many panyards. The music was all around him, and the pull was extremely strong. He was just 10 years old when Pancho Benjamin, a tuner from the legendary Renegades pan side, gave him a tenor pan, but his mother didn't allow him to keep it. He described himself as a restless youth, and Cape's parents didn't quite understand how to handle him, so they gave him a choice to go live with his grandmother in Grenada. Yes, indeed, he did have Grenadian roots, or to be sent to the nearby orphanage in Belmont. Cape chose the latter. He was 12 years old at the time and remained there until 16. During those 4 years, he learned music, first playing the clarinet and later switching to the saxophone because his tutors said it would offer him much more opportunities. And they were right. In 1969, playing with the Mighty Sparrow and the Troubadours at the Queen's Park Savannah, Cape shared a stage with the renowned Duke Ellington Orchestra. He later cited it as one of the proudest moments of his career. Now, while some began to describe Cape as the Duke Ellington of Calypso, the reality was that he had his own style and was always completely himself, leaving a unique stamp on the region's musical identity. Cape's sound, deeply rooted in the soul of Calypso, also ventured into genres like jazz and reggae, blending rhythmic, soulful, and energetic elements that were the engine of Trinidad and Tobago's world-famous carnival celebrations. We here at the Bubb Report will be paying tribute to the late Roy Cape at another time with other panelists from both Trinidad and Grenada. And of course, we also extend our deepest condolences to his family and friends. May his soul rest in peace, and may his memory be a blessing. Folks, thank you for joining us this week for another edition of the Bubb Report. We will be right back with our first guest, Grenada's Finance Minister and MP for St. Patrick East, the Honorable Dennis Cornwell. Please stand by.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
And viewers and listeners, welcome back to this week's edition of the Bubb Report. I am now joined by Grenada's Finance Minister, the Honorable Dennis Cornwell, who incidentally is also making his first appearance on the program. Minister Cornwell, welcome to this week's edition of the Bubb Report.
Thank you, Dr. Kellen Bob, and I'm very much appreciative to be on your program today, because I was in the past invited, but due to circumstances beyond my control, I was not able to at least be part of your program. But I'm happy to be here, and I'm going to give you the open situation whereby you can call on me anytime to be part of your programs.
Absolutely, Mr. Cornwell. Thank you for that. And I trust that your other colleagues would follow your lead, or follow the lead of the political leader of the NDC and Prime Minister Mitchell. But Mr. Cornwell, before we get into this economic conversation, you, of course, are the Member of Parliament for one of the constituencies severely impacted by Beryl. During the period of Hurricane Beryl, we heard a lot from the Prime Minister, we heard a lot from NADMA, but of course we did not hear, I mean, obviously I suspect you were on the ground doing a lot for the constituency, but can you talk about how Beryl has affected your constituency and the work you're doing in respect of ensuring that your residents and your constituents can be restored to their former glory?
Thank you. Let me first of all begin by saying that I spent the night of Hurricane Beryl in my hometown of Riverside, St. Patrick. In fact, I was part and parcel of the EOC, that's the Hurricane Shelter Management System based in Riverside. I spent the night there, so I got there in the afternoon, rode out the storm during the day, and I was one of the first persons on the ground in the late afternoon of Hurricane Beryl to start doing some initial assessment of some of the damages that took place in St. Patrick, East and West. So shortly after the all clear was given that the storm had passed, I tried reaching out to the various villages and towns, which was very much impossible because there were a lot of trees littered all over the roads throughout St. Patrick East and beyond. Later the day, after some of the personnel in the EUC would have cleared some of the part, I drove as far as Shantymill St. Patrick and was not able to continue because the road was blocked with palm trees, mango trees, coconut trees, and so on. I returned to St. Patrick and find my way all the way to Tivoli St. Patrick, and I used the Eastern Main Route to get to St. George's because I did want to get to St. George's to another location where I have residence and to allow me to report to my colleagues some of the damages that I've seen at firsthand in the constituency.
Absolutely, and of course we hear a lot about Carriacou and Petit Martinique, but let us talk about damage assessment. Have you as MPs in St. Patrick East and West been able to complete your own damage assessments, and what does that look like so far?
Well, the MPs were very much involved in doing the initial damage assessment, notwithstanding that we have had teams, persons from NADMA and other agencies doing the actual assessment on the ground. But from my initial assessment, I could have tell you that agriculture in St. Patrick received a significant blow, along with housing, because I've been to places like Livera, Rosehill, River Sally, Montrose, Hermitage, Snellhall, all the villages that actually form part of my constituency. And I could have seen houses completely blown down, roofs of some houses gone, windows broken in some cases. All the major fruits were on the ground, the mangoes, the soursop, the breadfruit was on the ground, the banana trees on the ground, and many more trees had fallen during the passage of the storm. So definitely we would have been able to tell you upfront that agriculture got a massive hit, as well as the housing and stock of St. Patrick.
Absolutely, and of course, incidentally, we will be discussing agriculture in the second segment. Now, Minister, let us get down to brass tacks because I want to respect your time. We will begin with the mid-year report was published by the Macroeconomic Policy Unit of the Ministry of Finance, and it paints a cautiously optimistic picture in respect of growth for Grenada, the forecasted growth for the next fiscal year, for the balance of the fiscal year and into next year. But it was also blunt, Minister, about the significant deficit Grenada finds itself in, due in part, of course, to what we are witnessing now with respect to the aftermath of Hurricane Beryl. Now, what does the report say about the overall macroeconomic picture of the state, especially in respect of those deficits?
Okay, so let me begin by saying that from January 2024 to June 30th, 2024, Grenada was well on its way in terms of a healthy economic growth. And that was basically guided by the results that we have seen in tourism, construction. We have seen it also in the education sector, as well as other sectors that form part of the Grenada economy. Now, on July 1st, 2024, the unfortunate occurrence of Hurricane Beryl, a Category 3 or 4 hurricane, passed through Grenada. And of course, it damaged St. Patrick, St. Mark, parts of St. Andrews, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. So overall, when we initially assessed what the damage would have been like, we were using a figure of at least 33% of the economy of Grenada was actually devastated by Hurricane Beryl. Now, the fine-tuning that would have been taking place on the ground since the assessors approached the ground would have basically said some things very similar, notwithstanding that we would have been of the opinion that Grenada had 1/3 of its GDP being destroyed.
1/3 of the GDP. That is significant there, especially in the context of the agricultural sector. Now, what happens in respect of, in the report? Now, the report speaks of course, these external economic factors, one of which has to do with the rise in inflation. How much is the rise in inflation impacting the government's ability to enact fiscal policy?
Well, I would say that because Grenada is not an oil-producing country and we depend on oil and gas and diesel from other parts of the world to basically run our economy, we are basically takers of whatever price oil and gas is on the market. And therefore, we have very little control over what we can do in terms of keeping the rate of inflation down. Now, over the years, government would have done a number of things or take a number of measures to help deal with the inflation of prices on the market. For example, Grenada has basically taken steps to reduce the VAT on electricity bill to 7.5% thereabout. We have also, at one point in time, removed the cap on gasoline, to let it float. So whether or not it basically goes down to, let's say, under 15% or up to a maximum of 17%, the government took a decision whether or not to put a cap or leave the cap off. I can remember in our time that there was only once we had to basically put back a cap on the diesel because it went beyond the $17 EC per gallon. But most of the initiatives that the government has taken in recent times would be geared to basically reducing inflation on food and other materials that we would use in the society. Take, for example, with the first state of initiative that we have given the people of Grenada having passed Hurricane Beryl would have been reduction in taxes on food, clothing, and other small household items and so on. In fact, we would have zeroed the VAT on those items to allow the Grenadian public to be able to at least buy the food, buy the clothes that they would have lost, and buy other household items that they would have lost. In a second phase, we would have actually reduced the VAT, CET, CSC, and other taxes that would be applied on those household items and materials for building those houses. We have actually zero-rated those taxes on those materials, making it cheaper for them to be able to purchase. So that, in a sense, would have been policy decisions taken by government to alleviate the problem of prices on the market for those type of materials and food to allow the populace to have a better price on the market. Again, we are saying to the businessmen that having done that, we want to make sure that you pass on those benefits to the general public.
Okay. Now, absolutely. Now, Minister, let us get into the supplementary budget. Of course, the Parliament was punctuated with a bit of a, shall we say, a procedural sideshow in respect of the opposition's response. So I believe that the public was robbed of a very robust debate in respect of what the impacts or the implications of the supplementary estimates would be on the national economy. Now, let us get into the supplementary estimates. Now, first and foremost, there were many concerns, Minister, that within the context of the supplementary estimates, there were particular allocations there. And I would list those. For example, $200,000 to lease property to facilitate the relocation of the London mission, $250,000 to establish the Grenada High Commission in Canada, $3 million, just over $3 million to purchase vehicles to assist with Beryl response, $200 million, $2,500,000 for content acquisition, social media, YouTube, and remedial repairs to tourist sites and attractions. I think that the first question here, Minister, as we get into the weeds in respect of the allocations, is whether or not these were priority items in respect of the urgency of Beryl, and given the fact that in a few months' time, we have a budget that we will be going to the country to approve. So your thoughts on that? Were these priorities now?
Yes. Yes, I would say they all were priorities of this current situation. And I'll basically try to give you a short explanation on why I think they were all priorities. Take, for example, the funds that we provided for the relocation of the London mission. I was in London sometime in June or July, there about June, I think it was. And I observed for myself the very deplorable condition where the Grenada High Commission was located in London. You would have vagrants loitering outside the building, defecating outside the building. It was not a healthy situation for them. And even if they had called the police on several occasions to get those vagrants out around the area, it continued. So therefore, we had to find a suitable place to operate our London mission so that there would be ease of operation without all these problems that I mentioned. In the case of the 3 million plus that was used to purchase, well, provided for purchasing of vehicles, again, when Beryl passed, Carrick found itself in a place where most of the vehicles that were operational was now non-operational. And we had to provide Carrick with vehicles to enable them to basically move debris, move personnel, move resources, so that the people of Carrick and Pitimatney can get supplies during that difficult moment. So I have no difficulty in saying that it was an urgent matter. In fact, we provided 16 vehicles to Carrick and Pitimatney for the same purposes. Some were used for moving debris, transportation of persons. Some were used by the security forces to ensure that there was law and order on the country. So I have no difficulty in saying yes to those. The others that you have mentioned, which I'm not going to go into details, but they were all essential matters that we had to deal with immediately to ensure that we can basically move swiftly to deal with the matters at hand.
Well, except, Minister, if I may, supplementary estimates for social media content creation. How is that a priority?
Well,
after Beryl?
You may want to say that it's not necessary, but take, for example, the Ministry of Tourism or the Grenada Tourism Authority. They can be considered as one of the largest contributors to the GDP of Grenada. In fact, without tourism existing in the manner it does at the moment and so on, we would have been in dire straits. So I have no difficulty in providing the Grenada Tourism Authority with the resources that it needed to make sure that it can deliver and continue to deliver high levels of growth. To date, we can say GTA and tourism has been able to deliver somewhere in the region of 20% of growth of GDP. And therefore, we have to take that into consideration also.
Okay. All right. Very well. So far, so good. You're batting well, sir. Giving justifications there. Now, Minister, let us continue in respect of last week on the program, and I will tee up a particular clip from the panel. That's Dr. Colin Gilchrist, Mr. Ambrose Phillip, as well as former finance minister, your predecessor, a fellow patrician, Mr. Anthony Boson. They expressed concern that elements of the supplementary budget may not be implementable by the close of the budgetary year. What mechanisms have you put in place, or what mechanisms are there in place to ensure that, or institutional capacity to ensure that what is budgeted for here would be implemented before the end of the fiscal year? And we only have perhaps, 3 months left in the fiscal year?
Well, I would say 4, because you have September, October, November, December. So let me start by saying I do respect the opinions and the views of the 3 gentlemen who were on your program. That's Mr. Anthony Boson, Colin Gilchrist, and the other gentleman. I can't remember his name right now.
Ambrose Phillip.
Ambrose Phillip. They are all respectable. They are all respectable gentlemen in Grenada who have done the bit during their time to make sure that they were able to at least contribute to Grenada's development. So I respect their opinion wholeheartedly. Now, I must say that the supplemental budget is in the tune of $269 million plus. And so I would attempt to say that the supplemental budget is ambitious, but doable. Now, you ask what steps that we have taken to make sure that we can spend those funds. Some of those funds would be in the form of payments to farmers, fishermen, and other persons in the society that would require immediate cash injection. And I think that we have said that in a 3-month period, we should be able to make all those payments to the farmers, to the fisher folks, and to even some of the TAMCC students would have actually provided funding in there to make sure that they can basically get on with the business during the school term. Take, for example, the students from Carriacou that would have been attending TAMCC. We know TAMCC in Carriacou would have been destroyed, and that most of the students would actually have to come to Grenada to basically continue their studies. The government in Grenada has actually provided for some assistance in the form of cash payments to those students to allow them to be able to find a home in Grenada, buy the books, buy the equipment, and to be able to survive in Grenada during this term of schooling. So again, that's part of it. That's cash payout. That doesn't require much technical stuff to get it done. Again, we have had in place Beryl Economic Secretariat, both in Grenada and Carriacou, which will facilitate the persons who have lost their homes and properties in Carriacou to be able to go there and make the claims for some kind of assistance. And that is now operational. So we believe that is also on its way. With regard to building back of homes in Carriacou, Grenada, in the north, we have mobilized most of the small contractors in those areas because we want to utilize our small contractors in Grenada and Carriacou and Petit-Martin as much as possible to make sure that they are able to benefit from the rebuilding process. So some of that money stays within Grenada and not necessarily go out of Grenada. And we have also had what is called a stock taking of all the houses that were damaged. So for example, in St. Patrick East, I know we have had taken stock somewhere in the region of 100 houses thereabout that has to be repaired or rebuilt. And we have actually had somewhere in the region of almost 30 contractors and other professionals in the construction sector that will be involved in rebuilding the homes in St. Patrick. Carriacou is a similar situation. I cannot speak much about the situation on the ground in Carriacou because I'm not in Carriacou. So I will leave that for the minister in Carriacou to deal with, Carriacou and Petit-Martin. And therefore, I believe so far we would have done exceptionally well in putting things in place to have work beginning on those homes and other facilities that we need to put back in place. Government also is looking at putting back in place its system because in Carriacou, for example, we didn't have an airport with roof on it. We have done that so far. The building where government operates, the post office and the revenue office and so on, that has been dealt with. The schools have been dealt with, and also the police station has been dealt with and so on. We've also tried to make sure that we deal with some strategic buildings in Carriacou that will help for us to be able to conduct our meetings, or persons that we're setting up to basically do work on the ground, that they have places to basically operate from. We also have the best secretariat in Carriacou, and we have basically tried to create what is called a one-stop shop, whereby the physical planning, the revenue collectors, the contractors, and all these persons can basically find a place to operate from so that we can fast track some of the things that are happening on the ground.
Absolutely. And of course, Mr. Cornwell, thank you again for that response. Now let us get into, I'll play one of the clips from our last program, and then we will talk about some of those concerns in the back end.
Under the MIT, construction of 200 homes on mainland Grenada, St. Mark's and St. Patrick and Grenada, and you have $15 million. If you do the calculation, which one will cost so you only, to do that, you only need $10 million, not $15 million. So what if you extra $5 million more? Yeah, and again, under MIT, allocation $6 million for renovation of government buildings, $10 million for facilities in Carriacou, $30 million rebuilding damaged infrastructure. What institutional changes, what manpower changes have we or will we undertake within the Ministry of MIT to carry on this workload? You have to tell me, where is your money? First of all, you need a rehabilitation plan. Then you need a manpower resource audit. You need to do a manpower resource audit to determine whether you have the capacity or capability to undertake this. And again, that might just be illusional to say.
But in the sense that it is not clear what some of the line items are intended to deal with. That's a problem. So I don't know if I should call them duplications. The question of 25 million for business development, that is a straightforward thing. We don't see another 25 million mentioned anywhere else, so we have no doubt that what that is for. Whether it is going to go through GDB or desired for some other agency of the government, that is not indicated there. But if you look through these pages of the stuff you have on the screen right now,
yes,
the Beryl response comes in about under 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sections. There is what is called Beryl response. There is what is called a housing response, and you have something in the what is clearly identified as Beryl response is about $21 million. Then there is the question of farm access, and we don't know if farm access has to do with clearing roads in the normal course of things, or clearing roads to get to people's lands in the mountain areas and so on. For farm access, you have $215 million allocated there. I don't know if there are duplications of one or the other, right? Or if the whole amount allocated for farm access is $30 million. If it is $30 million, it is a lot of money. And Boson is probably correct. Maybe the tendering process don't apply in that because it may be regarded as emergency or disaster relief or whatever it is. Then there's a section on the housing where you have 15 and 4 is 19 and 8, $27 million allocated there. And then there is what is identified as relief, and relief could mean anything from clearing roads, pest control, right? Ratification, de-ratification and stuff like that. You have 10 and 2, 12 and 30 and 3.8. So that is 42 and 3 is $45.8 million allocated there. When you add up all of these 4 sections, you are coming up close to $150 million. That appears to be direct Beryl response in one form or the other. So I can't tell you what is duplication or not. What is not clear is exactly what is forward.
Minister Cornwall, of course, that was a lot, and we did discuss offline that you will get an opportunity to see the entire program in the future. But before we get into some of the other responses there in respect of those specific line items, especially allocated to MIT, but some of those line items are also in other parts of the votes. Let us talk about the tendering process in respect of some of the rebuilding aspects that need to occur post-Beryl. Are those particular rebuilding infrastructural projects will be going through the tendering process? Because we know that the tendering process can take some time.
Well, let me first of all sort of clarify some of the things that you would have played in that clip.
Yes, sir.
As far as I am concerned, there is no duplication in any way within the supplemental budget. We have provided provisions for spending on Hurricane Beryl relief under several votes, and that is consistent in what our policy was. So I cannot speak to any duplication. What I can say to you is this. We as a government, we know we do not have internal capacity in terms of construction itself. So we have to basically depend on the private sector contractors or builders or whatever they are to basically make sure that those things are reality. So it is not intended for MIT or for Ministry of Infrastructure to be directly be involved in actually doing the actual construction. Yes, the provisions are made, and in some cases, it may require us to go out and tender a job out. However, we have passed in the House last year a revision to the Procurement Act, which allows, for example, where the procurement amount used to be $15,000, we have actually increased that to $100,000. So that if a project is less than $100,000, we do not have to go to a tenders vote to basically get a contract awarded. That is not intended, as some people have put it out there, that it allows for corruption and for us to give our friends and families jobs. That's not the intention. And if you look at what we did with the particular piece of legislation, all we did in there was to change the dollar figure from $15,000 to $100,000 to ensure that there can be much more flexibility and sustainability in what we are trying to do. Look at what, for example, a $15,000 can purchase today. If you have to build a house or build a bridge, can $15,000 do that for you? We are not going to pursue the policy of the former administration whereby they gave everybody a little 15,000 here, 15,000 there, and the quality of that work was so badly done. In some cases, it's a shame. So we said we are not going down that route at all. We are going to give the contractors sum of money that will allow them to complete a project in its entirety with quality and standard. And that's the intention of our changes to the procurement rules.
Okay. Yes, in respect of the allocations to the MIT ministry that are also found in other ministries in respect of the votes.
Well, in the case of MIT, Ministry of Mobilization, Implementation and Transformation, again, MIT ministry is not expected to be doing the actual construction themselves. So if you're looking at capacity in-house to basically do that, all they would be doing is to manage in the process so that contracts would be awarded on time, payments made on time. We mobilize the resources that is needed through our various hardware stores around the country to make sure that materials are delivered on time and that the projects are able to be completed within a time frame that is genuinely required for this time around. So MIT, although the resources are allocated to them, they are not basically doing the construction themselves. They will basically be contracting small contractors, small plumbers, small painters, small whatever role they play in the construction sector to be able to assist in rebuilding Grenada.
Now let us talk about the auditing process, Minister, in respect of the implementation or even auditing the implementation really of these particular projects. What contingency plans are in place to ensure that given the size of this estimate, that it will be properly audited as we go into a new budgetary cycle?
Again, I would say that government have in place a procedure through the Accountant General Department and the Audit Department to audit all government expenditures throughout the country. In other words, Audit Department, after the accounts are prepared by the Accountant General, will be submitted for an audit by the Audit Department of Grenada. This is the process that has been existed from day one. Nothing has changed to that. Again, the contractors have an obligation to basically do its work and submit its claim for payments. Again, those payments, before they are made, they are checked by the ministries that are submitting the invoices, the Accountant General Department, and subsequently these things will be audited at some point in time during the year. Now, I would tell you in the case of Grenada, we have had backlogs of audited financial statement for government dating back to 2016 to date. And that is not by chance, because for many, many years, former administrations have failed in making sure that these audits are brought to the Parliament on a timely basis. We have not corrected it in full as yet, but we are working on it as I speak. But they date back to all 2016. We are now in 2024.
Now, let us talk about, Minister. Of course, the Ministry of Finance, your ministry, normally treats with a budget consultation process. When will that begin? And this is just a follow-up on everything that you just articulated. And what are some specific parameters that you might be working with for this upcoming budgetary consultation process against the Beryl backdrop that we're working with now?
Okay, so let me begin by saying that the supplemental budget is allowed under government procedures. In fact, you can have up to 2 supplemental budgets in any fiscal year. So far for 2024, we have only submitted 1 supplemental budget in the sum of 269 million plus, and that is fine as far as the procedure is concerned. For 2025 budgets, we need to start the process sometime late September into October and be able to present a budget by the first 2 weeks in December. Generally speaking, what we do is to basically engage all the ministries and departments and other entities that would be required to make an input into the budget. And so this consultative process will start sometime very soon towards the end of September. We are currently in the process of basically trying to prepare what is called the notice to the various ministries and departments, so that at the end of the day, we can have the consultation that is required with every ministry and department to ensure that the requirements and the debate goes on between the ministry and department to ensure that the allocations provided for in the 2025 budget have been consulted on. And therefore, I have no doubt that we have time on our hands to basically do that, because the process is about to start.
Absolutely. Now, Minister, last week, Grenada held a meeting, I believe that was on Friday, correct? With your bondholders. And the notice of the meeting said, quote, Grenada is inviting all investors in the 2020 bonds to a virtual meeting via Zoom to discuss the impact of Hurricane Beryl in Grenada, the activation of the hurricane clause, and the general outlook for the economy. Can you talk about, if you can share, what were the outcomes of that meeting?
Okay, so I would begin by saying that we have announced to the general public that Grenada will be looking at suspending the debt payment clause in some of our debt outstanding, and including those debt profile are the bondholders that you talked about. We have institutional investors in there, like the CDB, the World Bank, the IMF also have loans in our books. We have also have bilateral loans in our books, including, for example, the government of Trinidad and Tobago. We have Libya, we have Algeria. All these entities and bodies and individuals would have had part and parcel of this debt profile that we have in Grenada. Now, we could not have been talking to one group of bondholders or creditors and not with the others. So therefore, we basically organized that meeting to make sure that we are talking to all our creditors to make sure that they are on board with what we are trying to achieve and not just select a group of people and ignore the others. I must add also that Grenada, for the last decade or two, we have been dubbed in selective default, meaning that Grenada has owed money to persons who we have not been able to address over the last 2 decades. I would repeat, there are Algeria, Libya, and the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Unless Grenada is able to get out of that debt default nomenclature, we would not be able to basically get a credit rating for Grenada. And so for the last 2 years plus in government, we have reached out to Libya, Algeria, and the government of Trinidad and Tobago to basically settle some of those debts. I can say to you at this point in time as I speak, we are almost there. And therefore, we will be shortly getting out of that debt default, selective debt default situation. And again, it's good to say all of that because, again, we have debt with Paris Club, we have with the bondholders, we have with all those other persons I've mentioned. And it's good to be talking to all your creditors rather than a selected group of creditors, so we do not bring into the picture any preferences for one creditor over the other.
So let us talk about the implications of the debt suspension, Minister, against the backdrop of this meeting. Now, Dr. Colin Gilchrist, who was sat on several government-appointed committees, he felt that it was imprudent for government to go the debt suspension clause. His argument was that given the fact that mainland Grenada was not damaged, that the state would still have the capacity to honor its debt obligations. Obviously, your government articulated why you went that route, and you did indicate that you were going to do the damage assessment before going that route. But was it a prudent decision to go that route? And the second part of that question has to do with the length of suspension. How much time are you granted debt suspension, and when would those debt repayments be resumed?
Okay, so let me respond to you by saying this. I do not wholeheartedly agree with Mr. Gilchrist on that particular point, because Mr. Gilchrist may or may not know the extent of the damage that has been incurred on Grenada by Hurricane Beryl and the resources that Grenada would need to build back Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. Now, there are lots of persons outside there who believe that because government of Grenada benefited from the CRIF insurance fund payout in the tune of 118 million thereabout, that we have so much money to Build Back Grenada. I would say to you, and I'm saying it again because I've said it before, that the 118 million EC dollars plus is not going to be sufficient to rebuild Grenada in its entirety. In fact, we have an assessment that we would be basically needing somewhere in the region of $1 billion plus to rehabilitate Grenada to the standard that it needs to be back on in a maybe 2-3 year period and so on. So we don't have enough monies to basically rebuild Grenada and so on. And for those persons out there who continue to promulgate that we have so much money, we got so much grants, and that we have sufficient funds to build back Grenada, that is incorrect. And we still need to basically take advantage of all the possibilities that we have to ensure that we can find resources, whether it's from the World Bank, IMF programs that we have access to be able to at least piggyback on those funds to be able to rebuild Grenada. And so there will be need down the road. We have not actually started spending those debt type of financing as yet, but we will be required to basically borrow monies to be able to at least build back Grenada bigger and better. So far, we have had a good start with the CRIF payment, but that is not going to be sufficient to do all that we need to do.
Now, Minister, the media report also painted a very, I should say, not very optimistic picture in respect of grants. I was very surprised that many of those grants were not forthcoming, as cited in the report. Now, the government in the last estimates of revenue and expenditure were predicting a significant inflow of grant funding, concessionary funding. What is happening there? And are we going to see an uptick in grant financing? Because that is one way, of course, that is one efficient way of funding the budget without going to the Bretton Woods institutions for that purpose.
Well, I can tell you this. Despite the talk about the government of Grenada have received lots of funds from friendly governments outside there, and they told him that is a lot of money. I can say to you that in terms of grant, outside of the CRIF payment, we have received less than 8 million EC dollars in grant towards the Beryl response. Some of the largest donors, I don't wish to call name, but I can tell you the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank would have provided about $1 million, the government of Dominica, $1 million EC. Most of the other institutions, they would have provided somewhere in the region of 100,000 US or 200,000 US, 300,000 maximum. So I'm saying in total, the amount of money we receive in grants for the Beryl relief is somewhere in the region of less than $8 million EC.
So what is happening on that front? Why does grant funding look in the way that it looks?
Well,
that trickle, there are those
institutions that came forward in a genuine way and make whatever they can. But at the same time, I do believe that the Prime Minister has been very extensive on this matter, that our country, who is not one of the polluters of the world, because the pollution that is emitted by the various commercial or very large countries that has major factories and so on, they are the ones who emit the pollution in the atmosphere, and that causes our storms in the Caribbean. They have not come forward and provided us with major financing. And I think that's the way we have to look at. The polluters are not paying for the debts. And some of the countries who are within our region, they're also affected by it, those pollution out there, and they still try and help us in a little way where they could. But the main emitters have not come on board. And I have no bones in saying that they need to do more.
Very well, and of course, in a press conference that was hosted by Prime Minister Mitchell and Prime Minister Gonzalez of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, I raised the question about the methodology for making the determination of a middle-income country, because the argument by the Bretton Woods institutions is that given the fact that Grenada is considered middle income, it does not qualify for a lot of the concessionary funding. And so the question I ask is whether or not there ought to be a new methodology for determining what funding we receive as small island developing states against the backdrop of this climate reality. Do you have any thoughts around the methodology that they use to determine whether or not we qualify for grants, or whether or not we should just go the route of commercial loans?
Well, I do agree that the assessment that is done sometimes by those institutions they have flaws in them because, for example, you may have one person in Grenada earning in excess of $20,000, but then again, the minimum wage in Grenada would work out to be somewhere in the region of $1,200 per month. So you would have those who have up here and those who don't have down here. Can you basically take a broad brush and paint everybody as being middle income? The answer is no. And therefore, I believe that some of the institutions have to basically relook the systems of grading those countries, because as far as I'm concerned, Grenada is not in a position to be considered to be a middle income country on its pure sense. Because if that is done, a lot of us would be below that poverty line.
Absolutely, Minister. Minister, I think you're batting well so far, sir. You're batting very well. I really, really enjoyed this conversation on the back end to our conversation last week. And I'm sure you had no difficulty with any of the questions that we posed here, unlike some in the comment section who seem to have an issue. Neither yourself nor the Prime Minister has no issue with appearing on the Bubb Report and facing the wicket here, sir. But Minister, two final questions, and of course we will get to the break. Now, let us talk about the 2025 budget. Going into the 2025 budget, what are some of the fiscal priorities of the administration outside of Beryl, or would Beryl be informing those fiscal priorities?
Well, Beryl expenditures will continue in 2025 and maybe 2026, because again, I said that about 33% of the country's GDP has been destroyed. So it means that that impacts on several government buildings, infrastructure, roads, medical station, health centers, schools, personal properties of persons out there who may not be able to rebuild their homes. But we also know that there will be persons out there who have actually had insurance on their property and will be able to at least help themselves where possible. So all in all, I believe that the construction and rebuilding of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique will be a long, winded process. We have started it, and we are hoping to basically deliver as far as possible within those 2-3 years.
But within your overall transformational priorities, how do you think that would stymie some of the priorities you have as an administration?
Okay, so I would say that the 2024 budget catered for a number of things. We have catered to deal with issues of the minimum wage. We catered to deal with the bi-monthly payment of salaries. We have catered to deal with extending the school age to 18 years. We have also dealt with a number of other issues that we have gone to Parliament and passed legislation to deal with. We have to continue it in the Parliament level or legislative process and so on, because there are a number of things that needs to be taken on board, and we have to pass it in Parliament so that the entire country will benefit from the debate in Parliament as to where we are going with some of the things. One of the things that we have done in recent times that had a lot of back and forth was the increasing of the penalties for the gun possession in this country. And again, I must say that I applaud the Prime Minister for taking that step to basically make sure that we keep Grenada within a particular framework. We cannot let ourselves go down the drain and be in the same grouping like our neighbors who have had in one day 15 and 16 deaths or killings on the country. We cannot afford to be down there. And those who basically break the rules, they should pay for breaking the rules. That's how far as it.
Absolutely. Minister, again, thank you for appearing on the program. Now, I felt as if there was a much more robust conversation on the estimates, as I indicated before, here on the Bubb Report, as well as in the upper house of Parliament. I can't say the same, given everything that occurred in the lower house of Parliament. But do you have any comments on perhaps what transpired in the lower house of Parliament in respect of the tiff between the MP for Carriacou and Petit Martinique, the leader of His Majesty's opposition, and the Speaker? Any comments on how that went down? Because I believe the national community was seriously robbed of a robust debate with the representatives in respect of the supplementary estimates.
Let me answer your question in the following way. The Finance Committee meeting that was held the Friday before in Parliament. The Finance Committee made up of opposition members as well as the government ministers. We have had an opportunity to debate the supplemental budget at that meeting. I wouldn't say that that meeting was a smooth flowing meeting either, because again, the opposition came there with their intention whether or not to basically disrupt the meeting or to basically try and listen to understand the explanation that was given for the various line items that we would have actually proposed in the estimate, sorry, the supplemental estimate. Now, I have one thing to say though, which I think is probably very controversial where I'm concerned. The very Friday night before the supplemental budget has been debated in Parliament, I've heard various radio stations and other avenues debating the supplemental estimate and so on, without having gotten the blessing and approval from the Parliament. Now, one may say that if you are prepared to take a document that was given to you in confidence and circulate it to your persons out there so that they can start making the arguments and making the comments and making the innuendos about the figures placed in there. If that is okay with the population or with you, that's fine with me. But I believe that when you allow for those duplication of information or non-information or stupidness to go out there, I believe one has to be very careful with that, because I've heard things that was never been part of the discussions or be part of the explanation of the numbers that we provide in the estimate out there prior to it being approved or being passed in Parliament. And so I think that is grave. And those of us might be saying that, okay, once the document is circulated to the parliamentarians, or it's a public document. But I think it is not proper for that document to be discussed or disputed prior to the meeting of the Parliament on these matters.
There would be two follow-up questions there, Minister. One, can you educate the public on the Finance Committee meeting? Of course, that aside, the Public Accounts Committee in Parliament also has its role. But talk about the Finance Committee meeting as sort of the precursor to what happens before Parliament. What happens in the Finance Committee meeting before any budgetary estimates are brought before the Parliament?
Okay, so the Finance Committee meeting, as I said before, is made up of parliamentarians on the opposite side as well as on the government side. They are the first ones to receive the supplemental estimate or appropriation in a detailed format as was presented in Parliament. And therefore, they are the ones to basically scrutinize the document and be able to at least ask questions so that we can provide them with answers to those questions they would have asked. Now, if at that point in time, a minister decide not to listen or to just basically try to disrupt the process, even if we went through that document line by line, from vote 10 as we actually announced to vote 64, trying to put explanation to every item. There are cases where more information was asked for. For example, when we presented on the $3.8 million that was asked about in terms of providing the vehicles for Carriacou, we told them that we were going to give them a list of the vehicles that were purchased under that particular provision. And this was basically the modus operandi throughout the Finance Committee meeting. So when they came to Parliament, they would have had sufficient explanation on the numbers that we have in the budget and so on. And they could have asked any more questions they wanted and so on, because there are cases where some persons wanted to basically make mountain out of a molehill, so they would have asked questions. That's not a problem. But the fact remains that they were part and parcel of the information provided in the Finance Committee meeting, and again at the parliamentary meeting when we basically debate the bill for the supplemental budget for 2024.
But you said that you're making the point that they came to the Finance Committee meeting with an agenda. I'm just trying to understand.
Every one of us have an agenda, and I am not basically singling out any particular person. Every one of us have an agenda, because I could say to you that in response to what we have heard from the opposite side at the sitting, some of this had nothing to do with the supplemental budget. It went on to talk about Ivan and Ivan and Ivan and Ivan, and then asking one of the parliamentarians for
an apology.
to recall a piece of information or make an apology to the people of Carriacou and Peter Macklin, particularly teachers. And the MP stood up and make his defense on that particular matter. I've heard the tape, you have heard the tape, everybody who has heard the tape if they want to. And they would have taken a position one way or the other. I have my position. I wouldn't tell you what my position here was, but I would fully support.
Why would you not say what your position is?
No, because you see, let me tell you something.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Grenadians like to basically beat up on people because they make a comment that they didn't like. And I am afraid if I make a statement here, it might upset the apple cart on the other side also. So I'm going to leave it as it is. The statement has been made, the decision has been taken, and I'm in fully support of what has happened in the parliament on the day when the opposition leader refused to recall the information that he provided to the House.
But
when he
thank
was
you for
asked
that.
on several occasions to do so.
Right. And in respect of, and again, and I made the point earlier, the national community, I felt, given everything that occurred there, was right. What about the Public Accounts Committee? Where is that concerned? I know that it constitutes representation from the opposition and government side. Where is that? I've not heard a lot about the Public Accounts Committee.
The Public Accounts Committee is different to the Finance Committee because that takes place when the accounts of the government is laid in Parliament. So, for example, you heard me earlier on saying that there are accounts dating back to 2016 that have not been laid in Parliament. So again, this committee would have an obligation to review or to interrogate that particular report that is submitted to the Public Accounts Committee at a later stage. It's not the same thing as the Finance Committee.
But I feel as if we have not been hearing a lot about the Public Accounts Committee sitting, unless I've missed it. I've looked at the minutes in Parliament and I've not seen any reports on the Public Accounts Committee.
And that because I think dating back to 2015 probably was the last time that was held, because again, as I said, there are outstanding audited financial statement that has not been laid in Parliament as yet. This is a grave concern of me. I have raised it in several forums and so on, and I believe that the Accountant General and the Audit Department must take steps to ensure that they can deliver those reports to Parliament, because the later they do it, it will be of no use to us and so on. Imagine you're waiting on the 2016 finance or audited finance to be laid in Parliament when we are now in 2024. What decision can you take when that is laid to Parliament that late? So we ought to work on those and make sure these are laid in Parliament on a timely basis. We inherit a situation, we're trying to work to basically put it in order, but it takes some time to get that done.
And of course, it also takes the opposition to also convene the Public Accounts Committee meeting in tandem with, I believe, a representative from the government. I'm not too sure who will be representing the government side on the Public Accounts Committee. But as someone who is in the Fourth Estate and as someone who was accredited to cover Parliament for many years in Grenada, the Public Accounts Committee was one of those critical pieces of parliamentary infrastructure for public accountability.
I agree with you 100%. And it's not that I'm saying that it should not be done, it should be done. Because we have too many years outstanding that has not been done. And it's not good for any nation to have that backlog of information that needed to be fed to the public.
Absolutely. And Mr. Cornwell, I want to respect your time. We will be getting to the second segment of the program. So I would offer you an opportunity for some closing comments, sir. And of course, welcome to the Bubb Report, sir. It is clear that you are not shy in respect of defending your honor as the Minister of Finance, as well as the Member of Parliament for St. Patrick East. So thank you again for appearing on the program. And I do look forward to subsequent engagements with you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Bubb. And again, I want to recommit myself to basically be available to any of the media houses who wish to basically interrogate me on matters. I am not one who basically shy to basically answer questions. If I do not know the answer to the questions, I would basically refer it. Right. But at the same time, when all this nonsense is being promulgated outside, I have a right to defend the government position on some of the matters that I have actually defended here this morning.
Absolutely, and I enjoy those engagements. I'm sure as the ministers who appeared on this program have also enjoyed those engagements, including the Prime Minister. And again, I wish to overemphasize that when yourself or any other government ministers come on the program, we are firm but fair in respect of our line of questioning. Our line of questioning is always grounded in research and evidence-based. So, Minister Cornwell, thank you for appearing on the program, sir.
Thank you again.
Absolutely.
And have a good day. Okay.
Absolutely. You as well, sir. Have a wonderful week ahead. Viewers and listeners, that was Grenada's Minister of Finance, the Honorable Dennis Cornwall, who's also the Member of Parliament for the St. Patrick East constituency. Earlier in the segment, he was able to give us an update in respect of the damage done to Hurricane Beryl in his constituency. We will take a quick break, folks, and come back for the second segment of the program. Please stand by.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
Tell us, a commissioner of police, tell a politician, back off. You have no knowledge of the law. You have no knowledge of law enforcement. You cannot force my officers to do the wrong thing.
But that is somebody's son. That is somebody's child. That is part of a family. And I think that is the part that they are missing out.
Because E and F are apt to be used oppressively.
It's like because we don't see disabled people as sexual beings, which is ridiculous.
You mean they don't want to listen to your version of science? They have their own science. You have your science.
What we need to do is teach people to think and not what to think.
Today, it's too bad that everybody do what they want.
If I could forgive Bernard Ford, then I could forgive Bob Morris too. And today, on this day, I no more have anything in my heart for what he did.
The education system has to be very fluid and dynamic because we're living in very different and changing times.
Treating all your citizens equally, all your citizens fairly, recognizing each group, not discriminating against one or the other.
Don't go there.
You are a technocrat. I mean, you can speak to whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate for that to occur. Would you have done that as a permanent secretary?
Politicians get the information from wherever source that they can.
That's going to be the extent of your answer.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
There's a lot of noise around the data protection bill that, in my respectful view, is not warranted.
I was one of those making noise, and it's simply because I was concerned about that specific section 33.
Don't go there.
Are you going to be offering yourself up as political leader of the party?
I see you've called me have a much more than diplomatic passport. I don't mind that.
Don't go there.
What is the relationship like between you and your leader, Dr. Mitchell, your boss, Dr. Mitchell?
I'm not sure how to explain how to answer this question at this time. I prefer not to answer.
Don't go there.
They said that you approached the bank for the loan before the election and that it only materialized after the election. There are also conflicting reports around the quantity of monies that were received. What is the reality here?
People try to extort the truth and to make all kinds of things about it. I just keep quiet. So if you notice, I was really and truly quiet about the whole matter.
Well, except with not with the New Today newspaper. The New Today newspaper reported on this, so I'm not sure you were quiet on this. Go ahead, Honorable. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to answer your question, right?
Don't go there.
I think we just spoke at length about the regularization framework. So
yes, we did. But let us talk, Prime Minister. Let us talk about the workers who are dismissed.
The Bubb Report. We go there.
In Grenada, as you know, the situation is horrific, especially in Carriacou and Petite Martinique. These two islands were completely destroyed. The livestock, permanent crop, cash crop, all investment in agriculture would have been completely destroyed in these two islands. Whereas in Grenada, there has been tremendous impact on the agricultural sector and production. As I said, the assessment here and in the other islands have continued. But we are very concerned about the immediate and medium-term ability of Grenada to quickly get back its productive capacity in agriculture. There are some thoughts and some initial ideas that I've already shared with some colleagues and also the chair of the Ministerial Task Force on Agriculture to see how we can quickly mobilize the necessary stakeholders and resources to address this tremendous setback that our 25 by 2025 action plan is being hit with by Beryl. I'm also deeply concerned and will be making the necessary calls in relation to FAO, ECA, and other institutions coming in from a very early stage to help our farmers and to work with the region. Because for sure, there are some changes in the methodology and changes in the approach to food production that we'll have to take into consideration in this build-back phase. I'm very concerned also that this is only the beginning of this hurricane season. And we've already seen such a major setback. And I'm only speaking, this setback is in the totality of the economies of these countries, but I'm speaking specifically on the area that I have responsibility for, that is agriculture, because I know the tremendous improvement and the tremendous investments and the tremendous goodwill that this sector has received from governments and farmers as a result of the activism and the strong work by the different governments and ministries and farmers. There has been a renewed vigor in increasing the productivity and agricultural output in all of these islands.
And viewers and listeners, welcome back to this week's edition of the Bubb Report. If you're joining us on the program, please remember to like and share this week's live stream. Now we are joined by Senator Roderick Sinclair, the farmers' representative in the upper house of Grenada's parliament, as well as Mr. Michael Batiste, former Minister for Agriculture and a farmer himself. Now, following the passage of Hurricane Beryl, Grenada's agricultural sector was dealt a serious blow, which has affected the nation's ability to reduce its food import bill in the long run. Now, at a press conference on Tuesday, 9th July of this year, Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell, who is also the chairman of CARICOM, provided an analysis of the agricultural sector in the aftermath of Beryl and the steps Grenada is taking to cushion the impact on the populace. He said the hurricane has pushed back Grenada's progress on the 25 by 2025 initiative between 5 and 7 years. Now, what is the 25 by 2025 initiative? it is an initiative geared towards reducing the nation's food import bill by 25%. And that, sadly, has been pushed back. Now, short crops and traditional and long crops grown in the northern part of Grenada have been badly damaged. The damaged crops include nutmegs, cocoa, banana, plantain, avocado, and mangoes, as well as other fruit trees. The aquaculture sector has also suffered significant loss. Most, if not all, of the sea moss nurseries have also been completely destroyed. Now, the government of Grenada intends to pump 11.6 million EC dollars in relief funds to farmers involved in vegetable and livestock, poultry, sea moss, beekeeping, and fishing as part of the Beryl relief drive. The package was effective for 3 months as of August this year. Now, registered farmers with less than 5 acres of land will receive a one-off payment of 4,500 EC dollars. Registered farmers with more than 5 acres of land will receive a one-off payment of 9,000 EC dollars. All of the farmers who have not registered but who have been assessed to have been damaged are eligible to receive the same amount in accordance with the size of their plots. The government also budgeted a total of $6 million in this regard and is targeting a total of 960 farmers. Now, meanwhile, 30 managers of nursery plant owners will receive a one-off payment of 4,500 EC dollars, which brings this to a budgeted total of 135,000 EC dollars. Now, the allocation in total brings up this to 6.1 million EC dollars. And of course, other allocations have been made in respect to livestock. So what we're going to do today, folks, is to discuss where the sector is, the state of the agricultural sector, and of course, the allocations that were appropriated for various farmers and fisher folk in the sector. Gentlemen, welcome to this week's edition of the Bubb Report. It's good to have both of you here. I think we're looking forward to another very important conversation because Hurricane Beryl affected the food security and the bread basket of the state of Grenada. And of course, it seems as though we're always having these conversations about food security after a major event, whether that was COVID-19, now it's Beryl, whether that was after Ivan. So, gentlemen, Mr. Batiste and Senator Sinclair, welcome to the Bubb Report.
Well, a pleasant morning to everyone out there, and I thank you again, Dr. Bubb, for having me on your prestigious weekly show. Before I begin, I want to once again express my condolences to Senator for the passing of his wife. I want to urge you to stay strong, my dear brother. I know how it feels in time of grief when a loved one have been lost. Before we begin and talking about the agriculture, it'd be remiss of me if I did not make some passing remarks on what I heard. Parts of what I heard the Minister of Finance said. The Minister of Finance, he said that Parliament did not approve anything, and therefore he heard the radio stations talking about matters that was not approved. And I'm wondering if we have changed, if we no longer democracy. Is there a law Parliament have to approve anything before the citizens could give their opinions on it? I am not so sure what he meant by that. And the second outrageous statement I've heard the minister made, he said the opposition came to disrupt the proceedings. And you know, I've heard it from some talk show hosts affiliated with them. What do you mean by disruption? The duty of the opposition is to go here and assist the government and to voice their concerns, offering alternatives and to take into the government to task wherever they see need. I don't know if the duty of the opposition is to be a choir, or just say yes and yes. So I think you're the Minister of Finance. You're better at the English language than I am, far better. I think you should find a better word to use than using this word disrupt. I'm not so sure that word is suited for parliamentary proceedings, whereas in the Parliament or the House of Finance, the House Committee meeting, the Finance Committee meeting, or even in the Public Accounts Committee. And my final observation is that he spoke about the Public Accounts Committee not meeting, and they're waiting on the audited report of 2015. And may I humbly ask the Minister of Finance, who is responsible for setting up that Public Accounts Committee? It is on the government side. The government must name, and the Minister of Finance.
They have to name a member for the committee, as far as I'm aware.
He is not a minister to that committee. And if he does not meet that, if the opposition leader, of course, is the chairman, if the committee does not meet the quorum based on the composition, because I think it's only one person on the government side that's not a minister, they may, in cooperation with the opposition and the leader of the opposition, name someone from the other place, which is the Senate, to make up that composition. So, Minister, when you come on this program, you must try to educate and pass and disseminate information that the ordinary people out there could understand, rather than trying to propagandize the situation and making it appear as if it's the opposition that is not setting up that Public Accounts Committee. And may I say to you, sir, the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee have the will to subpoena or call in members of the government, the PS or ministers before that committee. It does not necessarily have to be to 2015. It can be any matter relating to the government that the leader of the opposition sees fit
We absolutely will be watching this space there, and certainly in respect of the comments made on the estimates or any kind of documentation that goes before Parliament. I mean, in my days working in media in Grenada, those were always made in advance of parliamentary sittings, and unless the laws have changed, I believe those are all public documents. Now, in respect of how people use it, that's again, the Parliament is the people's house. But Senator Sinclair, welcome to the program. I was not aware that you suffered a loss. So again, my sympathies to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Bob, and thank you once again, my good friend, not doctor, but of course, past Minister for Agriculture and Parliamentarian, Mr. Batiste. And of course, good day Sunday to all our farmers, general public, local and overseas. I want to just make one point as Brother Batiste raised there, and the issue of the documentation. There are two issues. If you remember, in the last sitting of the Parliament with the supplemental, Senator Lewis would have raised an issue as to the issue of 6 clear days of receiving certified documents from the clerk, which should have been approved from the sitting of the lower house. And so if we at the Senate receiving uncertified documents technically is equal to just a document. And of course, we need that 6 clear days. So it's something that the government need to ensure that it follows that protocol. And additionally, the use of a document, as I say, it depends on how people use it. But for us, we need to use those documents for consultation, get feedback, get opinions, because those are the sort of things that drive the debate. Because whilst we represent issues, we don't know all the facts. We don't know all the points. We need to involve other persons in the process. And then the other point I wanted to make regarding the Public Accounts Committee is that for this session that would have just, I think that we basically closing a session. We haven't seen the prorogation notice go out for Parliament, but that should come shortly is my assumption. And we'll have a new session beginning in October. For that last session, I as one of the senators would have been appointed. I think Senator Rahman also is part of that Public Accounts Committee. Essentially, once Parliament is prorogued and that session is closed, and a new session starts in October, then at the first sitting, you have all the different committees, privileged committees, etc., would have to be reappointed for that new session. So while we speak about it now, essentially the specifics we'll have to address in the new session. So I just wanted to share that for public knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you for that update, and it's good to know that we have persons provisionally who would be sitting on a public accounts committee, because I think it's really overdue, Senator. As a nerd, and I'm not afraid to say I'm a nerd, I pore over parliamentary minutes in my free time. That's what I do, especially when I have to prepare for programs of that nature. But let us get into the conversation around agriculture. As I indicated in the lead up, we always have these conversations about food security and the need to bolster the agricultural sector, especially after crises would have occurred. And of course, we have a particular crisis now. First and foremost, let us assess where we are in respect to the damage to the sector. Mr. Batiste, you are not only a former minister, but you're also a farmer. You live in the bowels of rural Grenada. Can you articulate what you're seeing on the ground in rural Grenada in respect of the agricultural sector and the loss and damage that has affected the farmers there?
Well, Hurricane Beryl, have no doubt, struck a significant blow to the agriculture sector and, of course, the rural economy. I mean, prior to Beryl, the rural economy was already struggling as it is, with huge imports of basic items like cabbage and carrots, lettuce, tomatoes coming from other places. The cost of agriculture products was already very high. We saw a lot of livestock coming in from neighboring islands, St. Vincent and Grenadian. So that put us at a huge disadvantage. Now, looking at rural Grenada, the economy, I would say, is on a halt, a total halt. We have lost the source of trade, which brought in significant revenues to Grenada. We have seen the loss of the cocoa nutmeg, what was left of cocoa nutmeg and bananas, and trees that were planted after Ivan. We have seen a lot of the farmers now moving into a new group of vulnerables, because, of course, you know, once you take away the farmers' livelihood, they do not have an income. Some of them are not pensioners. They are people that depend on agriculture for the survival. The Beryl came in July, and this is September, and I think that the government must move in with a little haste, understanding the hardship that farmers are facing across the country. And you know, agriculture, though it's not as vibrant as it used to be, it still lends some support to the rural economy. And then recently we saw another serious blow. The rural economy suffered another serious blow with the closing of Kenco. I didn't hear the minister did not mention that, you know, when they came in. Kenco was a vibrant company. It employed hundreds of people in rural Grenada. That money circulated, and it gave life and it gave hope to lots of people. It was unfortunate I did not hear the minister make any reference to that. But in terms of the damage from Beryl, it is long overdue. I think the Minister of Agriculture and the Minister of Finance should accelerate the pace on which these checks are disbursed. And I want to urge them to revisit the situation as to giving out assistance based on the size of farms. The size of this farm is not an indication of your loss. There are farmers with small farms, and they had more production than some of the farmers with large crops, because a lot of these lands are wastelands. Some of them are non-productive. There are lots of young people today involved in agriculture on 1 acre lot, sometimes a half an acre, and they suffered significant damages. So I want to urge the government to revisit the situation closely and with a view of assisting farmers and finding alternative ways where you could engage them in doing so. We're looking at the poultry industry is another one. We saw 2 poultry farms popping up in Grenada, which is something good. That was on the agenda for a while, but some of them are now operational. So we want to urge the Minister of Agriculture and the government to coordinate with these farms and some of the farmers. We have the infrastructures around the country, some of the vacant buildings from the GCNA. See how we can get farmers, whether it is nutmeg farmers, cocoa farmers, see how we could get them to get involved in the poultry industry. There's a market there for that. See how you can arrange some contract farming with these 2 companies that have just started up, and get people involved. See how we could reopen the marketing board and use the marketing board in the process of getting these farmers to grow chicks, selling it to these 2 big companies that just open up, using the space that we have here now as outlets and whatnot, and see how we could circulate monies on the ground to the rural economy. And I want them to pay more attention to small farmers. A lot of the small farmers that are hurting the price of.
Well, Mr. Batiste, if I may, can you, and we will of course get to the allocations that are being made to farmers as part of the fiscal rescue packages. But are you suggesting that perhaps what was allocated is not sufficient? That a wider net should be cast?
That's just a drop in the bucket. $11 million is just a drop in the bucket, and you talk about paying them for what for their losses. What about replanting? I didn't hear the Minister of Agriculture is not aggressive enough in putting a plan on the table as to how we replant. Okay, so you give them assistance, and where do we go from here? Do they just get the assistance? Are you giving them planting material? Are you helping them with additional technical support and so on, so that they can get back into agriculture? You see, the Minister of Agriculture have to be at the center of it all, laying the plans for the way forward, not just paying farmers for what they lost. The country was insured for that, but we want to hear a plan for the way forward. After that funds have been disbursed to them, what's next? Where do we go from here? You see, we do not have a serious plan on how we resurrect agriculture. The government started off with a labor subsidy program. They were sending people out to help farmers with clear their lands. But that was not a plan. They had no plans for replanting. So the rain came and the grass grew back and all of that. And it was just a question of spinning top in mud. I've heard the Minister of Agriculture not jump into the creative economy. And I want to say to the Minister, diversification of the economy is okay, but we do not need to reinvent the wheel. Government must have a plan as to where do we go from here.
A sustainable and long-term plan. Let me bring in Senator Sinclair. Of course, Mr. Batiste sort of jumped the gun there, but we will be getting back to those allocations. But again, let us go back full circle here. Let us talk about that post-Beryl recovery situation for the rural economy. What is that looking like for the agricultural sector?
Well, I would say it's painful. That is how I would put it. When you speak to most of the farmers, I mean, both nutmeg, cocoa, vegetable farmers, poultry farmers, I would say it's painful because right now most of them, they are using their own resource, whether it's financial or just help and their own energy, trying to plan back, trying to clear their lands. Because as Brother Batiste has mentioned, while the government has pronounced this package, the money is yet to hit the ground. I personally, from where I see it, have been involved for my substantive day-to-day job at the Nutmeg Association, with the government, myself, Cocoa Association, in providing support in terms of this assessment, what has happened, and in terms of the sort of plans and so on. So from that end, I know that there is systems coming but it's taking very long. So, for example, the issue of the cocoa and nutmeg farmers being supported through the government system, we have to put a list together. Speaking about 5,000 farmers, you have to ensure that there is no duplication and the wife is one name and the husband is another name for the same plot of land. So it looks simple, but it's complex. I must say that we would have achieved that goal this week past. And so within this week coming, we'll submit this to the government. At the same time, the government will then need to take that list and compare it with other persons who would have also applied. And that in itself would take long. And we'll say, well, okay, there should be ICT and all of those things. But what this has brought to attention, Kellan, is that the whole issue of land registration and connecting them to farmers and ownership and that whole data-based system for the agriculture sector, I would say is something that is of high priority in the process. And if you look at even the budget report that we would have discussed at the parliament, the key point was made and endorsed and supported by the cabinet that we need to look at our whole data analytics and all of this. So it shows that coming out of this, we can see as a nation improvement in that regard. But it's painful.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to piggyback on what you articulated there in respect of that land, I'm not sure if the term is used, that if you all use the term land bank as well. Is that part of it?
No, well, what I'm trying to suggest is, for example, each plot of land has a LIBOR number. That is like its unique identifying number.
Okay.
And this must be connected to an owner. So we need to have that link in a whole centralized system. So the whole issue of the farmer registration connected to plots of lands, now we should have been able to, if we use that methodology of paying based on acreage, within 2 weeks, be able to generate that list because we have that process in place. So I'm calling that we need to have that registration of land, agricultural land with individuals. And that is very important for anything that we are doing. Of course, the land bank that's another discussion. It's a strategy of the government to, and not just this government, previous governments, to stimulate production of agriculture by making lands available to persons who don't have land and also particularly young persons. That, again, I must say, is very slow in taking off. It's very slow in taking off. But at the same time, I want to highlight a very important point that we are missing. And I have articulated that to the Prime Minister one-on-one, that the whole role of the Marketing and National Importing Board, not just for fresh fruits and vegetables, for whether it's meat, eggs, etc., to provide us first and foremost for food security. So the issue about closing it down and rediversifying it and all of those stuff, the first focus should be how do we use the instrument for food security. And so now we should not even be worrying about where farmers will be able to sell their produce, your storage and all of those things. And I trust that the government can relook that strategy because this is very important. Food security is the most important thing you could even think about, you know. And once you have that happening, Kellan, we have to look at the whole reintegration, how we plant. You know, we may plant cocoa, we may plant nutmeg, we may plant soursop, but we also need to plant our food crops in between. That is how farmers used to produce before. So they have for their home or they have for selling, and that also going to stimulate, because when you service this cash crop or this shorter term and medium term crop, you tend to also provide benefit in nutrients and so on for these longer term crops, because you need the longer term crops, you know, but they have to go hand in hand. I mean, that had to be our overall strategy. The point Brother Baptiste make in terms of this plan that the government has post-Beryl, I think this everybody want to know about it. I mean, I myself, as the minister, I've asked the PS, and they say the plan is incoming. Now, there's a great concern because we are moving into the dry season in very short order. And if we don't start replanting, then what is going to happen is that a lot of these crops are going to die in the early January, February time if they didn't catch or take root properly. So that's a danger that we faced going forward.
Absolutely. And, you know, in respect of that, now let us talk about, and we're still sticking here on the loss, and then we will go on to farming capacity here. But let us talk about the extent of loss and timeline for replanting, which you just articulated here. I remember after Hurricane Ivan, given the stock of nutmeg trees that was destroyed, of course, that set Grenada back decades. Yes, and Grenada once, which was known as the nation that was the second largest producer of nutmegs in the world, now has the unfortunate distinction of being fifth or sixth, or maybe even lower, because it takes so much time for a nutmeg tree to regrow. Let us talk about the affected crops and the replanting. Senator, I will stick with you here. What is the timeline in terms of years are we looking at before we see those yields return? And I'm not only referring here to the short crops, I'm referring to those long-term sustainable crops that usually takes time to regrow.
Yeah, I mean, so I would say, I mean, cocoa, nutmeg, soursop, mangoes, you know, we have to be speaking minimum 5 years. And otherwise, nutmeg might say start declaring in 5 years, 4 years. We still have to speak about when they get to that production that makes economic sense. You know, for like the cocoa, nutmeg, soursop, by 5 years, you should start seeing some production. Cocoa, nutmeg in particular, you're speaking about 10 years to start getting what I call an influential production. So really and truly, that recovery from those economic crops, we have to be looking between 5 to 10 years. That's the reality. I mean, you speak to persons now that are saying 20 years after Ivan, you know, they see the most amount of nutmeg, which is about the time of the maxing the production on the tree. Yeah. And that was such a great loss. So it tells you that cycle that we have to endure. And once again, at the same time, Kellan, a key factor while we're speaking about replanting, we must speak about the issue of germplasm. Do we have planting material? Do we have this amount of seeds? Because I know there are farmers who are looking for seed, looking for seedlings to replant. The propagation stations would not have been equipped to that quantity that is needed. And so some farmers are going to other farmers or maybe looking at their own lands to see how they can replant. And this also disrupts a major strategy, for example, the GCNA in particular, because in Grenada, we have three main types of nutmeg, the Banda, the Papa, and the Malayan. And of course, the Banda is high in oils. The Banda is the original black seed nutmeg. The Banda is high in oil, as sort of, not the Papa, sorry, is high in oils. It's shaped as a sort of Papa. And the Malayan, this was brought in as a fast grower, and you have less meal inside of that. The issue about this, though, is that we have taken a decision to try to increase the production in the Banda and the Papa. Now, strategically, working with the Ministry of Agriculture and also looking at the issue of the marketing, which is going to bring production in a shorter period. The challenge that we face now is if farmers have to be going and finding seeds anyway, it now jeopardizes that goal that we had. That is a major risk that we face going forward also.
Mr. Batista, I want you to piggyback on that in respect of that timeline. And of course, Senator Sinclair is making the point here that we do have a critical replanting window, and which to me would really speak to whatever plan that the government plans to articulate, which we're still waiting on. And perhaps that's why we are going to await government's announcement before we invite the Minister of Agriculture again, because without that plan, I don't think it would be a robust conversation to have. But Mr. Batiste, let us talk about what Mr. Sinclair just articulated here.
Well, first of all, I don't think we should wait on a crisis to have a compilation of farmers and farmlands and all of that. That should be done by the Extension Division. I'm sure this information is in the Ministry of Agriculture, the Extension Division, that's readily available. You see, agriculture is timing. So, you know, everything involving agriculture is timing. We lose a lot of time. If we're going to plant bananas, we have to do it in a way so as to coordinate with the weather. But I want to look at root crop. because it's not every part of Grenada we can grow nutmegs. Let's look at the lowlands. There are areas in the lowlands where we may identify for root crop. We can grow ginger, we can grow lots of potatoes, we can grow tanya, we can grow carrots, and so on. We have to find alternative crops. Now, many years ago, after we were suspended by WIPDECO for shipping bananas, and of course the WTO came in with the new regime, alternative crops was identified, and one of it was soursop, and the propagation station was requested, was directed to make more to produce soursop plants so that the farmers could have that available, and we saw the results today. I think in coordination with the Ministry of Agriculture and the Farmers Association, we should look at alternative crop, look at root crops. We could look at pumpkin, watermelon, cucumbers, cabbage, and so on. We cannot expect our young people to go back in agriculture with long-term crops that will take you 5-10 years. They need things immediately, because most of our farmers now are under 45, and therefore we need to go into a hurry-up offensive scheme where we bring these farmers together while we concentrating on planting 3 crops for long-term purposes. But we need survival crops immediately. And as we look at the market, we see so many things coming out from the outside, things that we can grow here. And I think the ministry and the Minister of Agriculture have to be more aggressive in getting the farmers together, helping them with planting materials. I mean, we travel a lot. We go into countries, China, the Far East, and we could beg for seedlings. A lot of these planting materials are expensive for farmers. And as the senator rightly concurred a while ago, most of them are now using the hard-on cash. So delay in disbursing the checks has serious implication on the future of agriculture in Grenada. Some of them may go out of business, they may get broke and become so disoriented, and they may not get back in the lands, as we saw what happened when during the Millibug era. We lost a lot of the farmers because they lost their crops and they just decided that they're not going back there anymore. So we have to make haste while the sun is out, and we must do so, and we must do so now. We cannot just talking and photo ops and promising and young going farmers like that. Farmers are hurting. This is the time when we should show the insurance company, CREF, within 2 weeks after Hurricane Beryl, a check was made available to the government of Grenada for the farmers. And we are now into September, and we are still hearing about promises from the government about monies to come. Please, Minister of Finance, Minister of Agriculture, let us get these checks available to these hard-earned farmers that need the farm to get back in the lands. We have to plant back bananas, which is a short crop. While we're doing the short crops, we could look at the long-term crops. But first of all, let us get the farmers to plant food for food security, and that could take care of the families, and we'll bring them ready to cash so we could keep moving.
Absolutely. So, Senator, go ahead.
Yeah, if I may add, and let us not leave Carriacou and let Carriacou feel left out in that discussion, because on the whole issue of timing for Carriacou, and as was articulated, by Senator Cox even in the last sitting that we had, he related it to housing, but I not dealing with housing. I'm speaking about water for our livestock. Carriacou is a main livestock area, and if we want to rebuild that quickly, they need to be able to start storing water, have that infrastructure, even if they don't have the animals, because that is of the essence in Carriacou. I mean, they're less fortunate than Grenada in terms of that water resource. So this is very important moving forward. Even the livestock, the sort of breeds that we have, we need to bring in, whether it's semen or whether it's the animal itself. All of those things will take time, and so when I say you take time, and so we need to act quickly on those things. Otherwise, we'll be set back. Even, Brother Baptiste, we were in that poultry meeting a few days ago, and the issue that struck me in that meeting, and I scratched my head, and I said, I hope we'd have eggs for Christmas, You know, I went by one of the farmers this morning to purchase some eggs, and I saw some young chicks, very young, maybe a week old or something like that, that seems to have purchased recently. And I say, well, okay, well, it seems as if we may, if that's the strategy. But this is a concern I have. And what it does, Kellan, is that it opens us up to ridicule as a nation, particularly with the rise and increase with all the tourism sector, who would speak of wanting to guarantee the supplies. And of course, some of the supermarkets, you know, wanting to guarantee supplies. We are heading into the tourist season starting sometime in October. So the question would arise, what is that strategy? And so once you start creating that situation, then it disenfranchises, I would say, quote unquote, the local producer from even being motivated to get into that, because he knows he's going into a dry season. So he basically losing a whole season. Well, and by the time the season finishes, it goes back into hurricane season.
And the dry season. But before that, we have dry season. Mr. Batiste, yes.
I didn't leave out Carriacou, you know. I was sort of...
No, I didn't mean you per se.
Not you, Mr. Batiste, not you.
I'm giving an explanation.
Okay.
You see, I didn't mention Carriacou because I know water is important for them.
Yes.
I didn't want to go there. How can they collect water when they're living on a tarpaulin? You see, the farmers in Carriacou, and you see, that is what the policymakers are not getting. They're just not getting it. We have lots of livestock farmers in Carriacou. Their livestock was also destroyed during Beryl. The farmer in Carriacou is now homeless, and he's without the support of his farm. So, unlike Grenada, where we have water, but Carriacou needs the water supply they get from the roof and they store it. So we have to urge the government to look into the situation in Carriacou and see how you could assist them in the Carriacou with the housing, because they need to store water for human consumption and for the animals. And without that, they're nothing. And Carriacou plays a significant role in the development of livestock in Grenada, because we get lots of livestock from Carriacou, goat, pig, sheep, cattle. They come from there. But if they can't supply us with livestock, where are we going? So Carriacou is intertwined with the mainland in terms of livestock, because as small as they are, and without the water supply that we have here, Carriacou produce more animals than Grenada by far.
Yeah, you see, and to still keep on the food security topic, I don't know, Dr. Bobby, want to maybe move us a little bit. We also have to look at another major issue. We speak about the government position of having free school meals and a free school feeding program. It means that you are essentially making a commitment to feed about 14,000 students, plus or minus. You look at all the primary school guaranteed, etc. Where are we getting food? This is a ready market. Where are we getting food for these persons? And so the good thing about the driver to all of this is that there is a market, you know. So whatever production that can be stimulated now, we know is going to help to control the inputs. It will guarantee whatever government's program and intentions are, and person's mind can be more restful. So the question to a household, to a mom right now is that, would my child be able to get adequate food in school, or would it be inputs when we're not supposed to be inputting? What is that, even if to start to provide support for that angle? So it's concerning, I would say.
Yeah. And one of the points you raised here now, post-Hurricane Ivan, the farmers had the facility of the Grenada Marketing and National Importing Board. Of course, that was dissolved owing to financial issues there. The government indicated that a new entity, a private-public entity, would be put in place of Marketing and National Importing Board. We are still waiting on that to occur. In fact, the last report from the Prime Minister was that was sometime last year, I believe, no, earlier this year, rather, earlier in the year, where the Prime Minister articulated, that that has stalled because a member of the committee that was looking at how to proceed with a new entity was no longer on the committee. And so my question was, at the time, was why is it that we have not replaced that new member? And of course, the farmers, of course, would need such a facility for a time like this. Mr. Batiste, I would begin with you on that question.
First of all, I need to say that maybe the senator should put a committee together to sit with the Prime Minister and talk about agriculture in a sensible way, because he appears to be lacking critical advice on question of agriculture. I mean, I've heard the Prime Minister talking about farmers buying trucks with solar panels and going around the country and selling fruits and vegetables as a replacement for a marketing board. That is totally outrageous, Prime Minister. You're living in dreamland. That would not happen. Farmers could hardly buy a bag of fertilizer, Prime Minister. You need to go back to the drawing board and looking at that. You need to restore the marketing board. You need to revive it. You need to put it under new management. You said it's transformation, transform the marketing board to make it better functional, to make it as such that it can be a significant part of the development of agriculture. Marketing board was there since it was created by the late great Eric Gary. It was meant to assist farmers. The PRG came and they upgraded on it a little bit. They extended on the functions of marketing board. You came in now and you dissolved marketing board. Marketing board is a lifeblood of the rural economy. Farmers having a two bucket of tambran, a few golden apples and so on, they can take it to marketing board, they can get a check and they could go back and feed their families, send their children to school. We need a plan for marketing board. We have a poultry industry now. The World Bank have given Grenada $10 million for the development of livestock in Grenada. Use that $10 million to assist homeowners with materials to build pens and so on. Bring back the marketing board, extend on the terms of reference on the marketing board, use marketing board as a processing facility so that they can buy all these chicks from the farmers, use the GCNA buildings that's vacant right now, that's not doing nothing in the community, use that as a depot where farmers could drop off their live birds and they could process it and assist with full security. This stuff you're talking about, farmers going around the country, buying a truck with a solar panel and going around the country selling fruits and vegetables, that's pie in the sky, Prime Minister. That is not workable. A bag of fertilizer, a bag of feed today is $50. Recently, your cabinet approved a 40% share of the poultry industry for local farmers. And I want to ask you again, Prime Minister and Minister of Agriculture, how is that possible? How are they going to achieve that 40% with the high cost of production materials? We are getting chicks from outside. We have lots of fatalities. Farmers are broke. Feeds are very, very expensive. You need to go back to the table and come up with a comprehensive plan as to how we can reduce on the cost of feed and other operating materials for small farmers, both fertilizers and otherwise. If not, it is just stock. Farmers would be unable to meet that 40% that is set aside for the local market. And by the way, when you talk about the 40%, you have not spelled out the specifics on how that's going to work. Would it be 40% higher? The price of the 40% would be higher than the 60% of the imports. because we did not make a determination as to what you're going to do, because it needs political will there in terms of the import. Whether you're going to use the situation that is available to us in terms of the quota. The WTO has now approved for Grenada to increase on the bound rate of poultry products coming into Grenada. We spend an awful lot of monies petitioning the WTO with Dr. Patrick Antoine to get them to improve on the bound rate. Are you going to use that and introduce new tariffs on imports, or are you going to subsidize heavily the local industry for a number of years until the sharks and sardines can swim in the same waters? Because just saying that 40% set aside for local consumption without assisting farmers to meet that 40%, I think it's just another talk. So we have to go back to the table, and I'm urging the senator to please get together with the Prime Minister, put a team together with farmers, and let's talk some sense and see how we could have a workable plan that could help Grenada and stimulate the economy. We just can't wait until after a crisis. And then we're talking food security. What about throughout the years? When you go to the markets now, you'll see what it is. I bought 1 grain of plantain in the market in St. George's for $5. So 5 plantain for $25. It's selling right now in the market. A pound of bananas have not moved since Hurricane Ivan. Bananas was at $1.50 a pound. Now, God knows how. I think it's over $2 a grain now. How could we talk about utilizing what we have locally when the cost of local agricultural products is so high? A cabbage coming out of Canada, $14 a pound. You're looking at cabbage there. Beets and all of that. Those are ground and provisions that we could grow here that would not be affected by the hurricane. So the food security must involve items that we could grow year-round, because we have water, we have lands near the river. We must identify farmers whose lands lends itself to production of food that can boost our food security in times of a crisis. And we don't have that. Agriculture right now is in a helter-skelter way. We don't know who producing what or where. We must get together with the tourism sector. We must go back to contract farming. We must sit with the consumers and sit with the farmers so that the farmers are growing directly for the consumers. So when a farmer grow and he have a 200 pound of tomatoes, he don't have to walk around Grenville on St. George's with a bucket
trying to get a market for the
Yeah,
absolutely. You have thrown out a challenge there to the senator, and Senator, I will give you a chance to respond, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's very, very well said, Brother Baptiste. I would say though, Dr. Bubb, to start with, in terms of, it's my understanding from pronunciation of the government, the Prime Minister, that they would have received the report from reported into the MNIB that we would have got a result sometime in June, July. I think Mr. Chris DeRiggs was appointed as the new chairman of the committee, so that again is for information purposes. We do await that result, and of course, post Hurricane Ivan. I mean, I was at the MNIB at the time, and I recall, the devastation, particularly with bananas, and we were able to, and if you go into Closure, Belvedere, they would tell you, we were able within 1 year to be shipping 700-800 boxes of bananas to Trinidad every week. In fact, Mr. Bell, can't remember his first name, Ronald Bell, I think it was, at the port, used to be coming every week to say they were so happy to collect that data to show that Grenada is really trying to do something. So the bottom line is that there are persons who know how to do. We have done, meaning that we know how to do. And so we need to really be not running aground and wondering what to do. And all those points articulated in terms of the root crops and so on, and opportunities, as alluded by Brother Baptiste, is very relevant. The issue of the 40%, I mean, I was amazed and happy to hear that in that meeting on Thursday evening. And it occurred to me, say, well, do we have the capacity, not just in terms of infrastructure, but in terms of the pricing, such that the product would be competitively priced for the consumers, and how do we ensure that the cost of the feed is really lower. And I think that is an intervention that the government need to do, whether issue some tax arrangement with Caribbean Agro to have that reduced. I remember in my first stint as a senator moving a motion to look at the whole issue of price control of certain key inputs that farmers need. In fact, the government at the time sort of come with a counter proposal and respond saying that, look, it really and truly is the cost of freight that causing that. Cost of freight or not, go and look at the margins that are high on the inputs by these private sector person. I'm not saying you cannot have open pricing, but there are some key input that you need, just like medication for your pressure, for your sugar, so make them accessible. And I think that we are missing out. I don't know why we're missing out on that, but we need to relook that, because when you look at the whole beneficiary of that whole issue with the freight reduction initiative, which was great, how did it influence our local production in agriculture? In fact, if you look at the medium-term report that was just submitted to Parliament, that we debated, not debated, used as part of the documents laid, they speak about a 43% increase in feed production or something like that, and that is to stimulate livestock. And I say, well, where is the livestock that really benefited from that? I'm not seeing the livestock. Basically, is the increase in freight cost, increase in the cost of feed, and it's a numerical figure, so it rises. And so the point that Brother Baptiste raised in terms of...
You could call me doctor, it's okay, I'm a doctor in the street.
yeah. So when you look at
he has earned those stripes.
He has earned those stripes. Based on appearing your honorary doctor on the Bubb Report there. So the fact is that value continue to rise, and it make the cost, and then the cost, and then you look at the point, Kellan, the issue of contract farming is very important. We have to regain the confidence, because once you have contract farming, you can then use those contracts, hopefully, and you go use it, and you go to a factor, maybe GDB or maybe one of the credit unions, and then now the farmers can access, if it's 50% of that purchase order, to access resources, whether it's inputs and so on. And some of the major supermarkets already have supplying agricultural inputs. So if they have any confidence of delivery, there is a proper infrastructure for that. But I want to say, someone may counter and say, well, okay, well, it's good to say this. The government will say, look, we are providing fertilizer at a low price. And we welcome that and have no problem with that. But the question is, how sustainable is it? Will we getting that fertilizer cost for the next 10 years, next 3 years, next 4 years? So yes, the government need to look, we need to look, Brother Baptiste, at these 10 or 20 items. One, that we want to grow as a nation for food security, and if there's economic observation, and also what can spill off into some value added, semi-value added. And then we need to look and see what items do we need to have as price control that are going to support. I mean, we control the price of fuel, we control the price of sugar, we control. And when it comes to that mechanism for farmers, we're in trouble. The only sector that might benefit somewhat is the fishing sector, where you have, and you're very familiar with the fishing sector, Brother Baptiste, in terms of the fuel charge and in terms of a lot of the other inputs. And when you look at the fishing sector, we can see how they have grown and the impact they are having. So it shows that if we really do that, it will help us at the end of the day.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the fishing sector, because my friends on them in Subies would have strangled me if I didn't get in on fishing. Now, we need to assist fishermen with a little more than just rebates. We need to look at the craft. We need to help them to preserve the catch so that when it comes ashore, the fabric of the fish can maintain and it can be used for export. So we need to look at how we could help them to meet that HACCP standard, so we can ship fish to Europe. We need to find alternative markets. Too many times fishermen out there engage in happy hour. They're going out to sea because of the bad economy. people cannot buy a pound of fish, and therefore the fishermen have to, instead of they going home and take a rest, they have to be out there pushing the fish. But let's get back to the agriculture a little bit. We need to look at the land bank. We need to look at the land bank. We need to look at pre-Beryl larceny. We have not touched on that. And let me go into the question of pre-Beryl larceny. When I was the Minister of Agriculture, I piloted a bill in the Parliament that created a fund, a pre-Beryl larceny fund, that was administered by the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture. And that pre-Beryl larceny fund allow for the magistrate, when you charge the offender, that money goes into the pre-Beryl larceny fund, and the Permanent Secretary will write a check and give it to the farmer who suffered the loss. Since that time, that pre-Beryl larceny fund have expired. We need to reactivate that pre-Beryl larceny fund, whereby magistrates charging anyone for stealing a farmer's produce or damaging anyone's produce, that proceeds go into the fund, not in the consolidated fund, because as it is now, it doesn't even make sense in a farmer reporting his loss. At the end of the day, the farmer gets nothing. He wastes time from his farm, he loses crop, and government is the beneficiary in pre-Beryl larceny as it is. So we need to go back to the drawing board, and I want to urge the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Agriculture and the Cabinet as a whole, reactivate that pre-Beryl larceny fund so that the magistrates, when the magistrate charge someone, that monies will go into the fund. In terms of the land bank, we look around Grenada today and we see what is happening. A good portion of our lands are under cultivation. The Ministry of Agriculture, the government of Grenada must engage farmers with these lands and offer them incentives, as was done before. Deposit these lands in the land bank, whereby young farmers who cannot afford to purchase lands will have access to these lands from the Ministry of Agriculture that was deposited in the land bank. We are not talking about acquiring people's lands now. We're talking about an agreement between the farmer and the Ministry of Agriculture, where some tax relief is given to the farmer, some tax break is given to the landowner, and these lands could be made available to the farmer. So they have to go into an aggressive mode and take agriculture more serious. Agriculture is not about photo ops and talking points. Agriculture is about our food security, our livelihood, the livelihood of rural people. And I think what I'm seeing so far, there is no seriousness on the part of this administration to seriously work with rural people to get agriculture moving. As such, our rural economy have collapsed. You look around Grenville on any day, and you could have, Friday evening, you have to ask if it's month end, because that dollar is not circulating around the farmers. You kill the marketing board, so people have the little stuff to sell. They are unable to sell it, and therefore money is not circulating. So you have to go back to the drawing board and do a holistic approach on agriculture, not to take photos and to talk, but to come up with serious plans that could resurrect. This is serious business. Our lives depend on it. Those of us...
in the same way we say tourism is everybody's business, agriculture should also be everybody's business. If tourism is everybody's
business, then we must
so
have
should agriculture. Yes.
What I used to call local export. And you know what the local export means? When the tourists come to the hotel, they will eat whatever we have here. So we exporting it, rural Grenada exporting the crops to St. George's, to the hotels. And we know for sure the height of the tourism sector. So we know the consumption from the hotelers. So we must now have farmers prepared to grow for the tourism sector. So this dollar, so we have what you call now a linkage, the circulation of the tourism dollar to the rural economy. If not, tourism just making a small circle the hotel industry, they import stuff from Canada and North America. It comes into the port duty free. They feed the guests and everything stays in one place in St. George's. But if you want we the rural people to get a little slice of that tourism dollar, you just don't tell us tourism is everybody's business. We have to be a part of it. Pumpkin, watermelon, bananas here, cabbage, what we grow in here. A Canadian tourist should not come to Grenada and eat cabbage made grown in Canada. That should not happen, Senator. So we have to tell the policymakers, get serious with this agriculture thing. It seemed to me as if they learned nothing from COVID. During COVID.
Yes, Mr. Batista, I know you're passionate about it, but my producer is yelling at me. But we also have to close the program. But Senator, over to you for a quick response, and then we'll get to closing comments.
So the issue of pre-larceny, that's a very big issue. And there is a pre-larceny fund has been set up again, following some dialogue with the Prime Minister. The fund was actually set up. There is an account number that was given in response to a question that was provided. So that was done. So it shows that there is will. And so sometimes I ask myself why the will is not continuing. You know, so for example, the pre-larceny unit, the officers they are not ranked. So they are like rural constables. So we need to have them incorporated as a regular person in the police force, which can be maybe a sergeant in this pre-larceny unit, etc., so that they can get all the different benefits that a regular police officer has. There are persons who have been pre-larceny officers who are coming to me and say, look, I retire and see what you could get from me, because they get nothing, or maybe little or nothing. So that need to be restructured and reorganized. Otherwise, we would have problems with the whole issue of pre-larceny African farmers. The issue of crop compensation, which is closely linked, and I've championed this, and I don't understand why a simple instruction, and this is an engagement I have with the current minister, notwithstanding, I would have moved a private member's bill in the last session, and I would come back with it, and it's wrong, that it is at the discretion of the Minister of Agriculture to say, let us review the cost, the crop compensation schedule. So meaning that the cost of a cabbage 20 years ago that would have been damaged in the field by some thief or maybe some reason, today that cabbage damaged is a totally different price based on the cost of labor, cost of inputs, and all of those things. And we interfere with the wage bill, minimum wage, and all of those things. And these directly impact the minimum wage and income of farmers. So I don't understand why a simple instruction as saying, I here today declare an order that these prices be reviewed. It may take 6 months, 3 months, and let the Ministry of Agriculture and the technical team get that done. Right now, farmers have been robbed because of this crop compensation schedule is almost 30 years old. So it's like working with a 30-year-old salary. And I find it's really, it's sickening and sad, you know, especially when we come and speak about minimum wage rise. We say, yes, farmers have to pay more for the labor. Yes. But if you damage the cabbage, is a 30-year-old cost that we gain. That is totally unfair and ridiculous. I want to really put this clear on record. And of course, the last point I want to introduce, I know we're closing, is the issue of farm rules, but Baptiste. It's something that we need to look at because it impedes farm access. Even if a farmer have a nice vehicle, concession on the vehicle, you have no rules to drive it. Of course, the government would have yielded to some responses that where there are elderly farmers, for example, who want the child, 17 years, 18-year-old, to drive the pickup and so on, the small vehicles, and that we would have been able to have some successful support from the government and so that they could get the grandchild or the younger persons while the father might be at home or doing some other initiative. But you don't have roads to drive it on, you know?
Yeah. So the infrastructure has to be there as well. Gentlemen, Mr. Batista, I'll go over to you for some closing comments. But, you know, these topics are not quote unquote sexy, but these are critical topics to have to be ventilated in the public discourse because food security is national security. It really is. Mr. Batista, over to you for some closing comments, sir.
Well, I want to urge the government to define clearly how that 40% set aside for local growers would manifest. Because they have not indicated whether or not they want to go back and use the boundary that Grenada spent so much money to retain from the WTO, where we now have the weapon where we can charge the imports and give the local growers an opportunity to grow. So it is a political will. And I want to ask the government how you plan to bring about that 40%. With the cost of feed being what it is just pie in the sky. I want to urge them too, that $10 million that the World Bank have given Grenada, and its money is sitting there for over 2 years now. I did not hear anything about it. That $10 million is to assist in the development of livestock. I want to urge them, do not use that $10 million the way you use COVID fund, where you disseminate it to your supporters and encouraging people who are not in business to come on board, register in business and get in that fund. The World Bank was serious. They look at Grenada's situation, use that money to assist poultry farmers, livestock farmers, farmers in general. Look at the situation with fishermen and see how you could help them. Also, I didn't hear much about fisher folk. Some of the crafts were damaged. The seaweed and all of that. I didn't hear much talk about how much of that money is going to fishermen. The fishermen were an integral part of that insurance policy. As a matter of fact, the insurance policy was so good, it even made preparations for heavy rainfall and high wind and loss of trees and whatnot. So we have work to do. The government must sit with the farmers, along with some stakeholders, and coordinate a serious plan for the way forward in agriculture. And I want to urge the Prime Minister to stop that, squash that pie in the sky stuff that he was talking about, farmers buying trucks with solar panels and going around the country selling stuff and all of that. That can work. If you said that in the campaign is over. Let's get to reality now. Let us come up with a sustainable plan so that in times of crisis, not just hurricane, we saw what happened in COVID. In some health epidemic could hit Grenada again. So I want to urge everyone to get serious about this agriculture, because our lives depend on it, and we have seen from the economy, from our economy right now, the sluggishness in the rural economy is directly related to the collapse of agriculture. So I want to again thank you, Dr. Bubb. I want to thank the Senator, and Senator, stay very strong in your time of grief, and you're holding up very well, because I know what it is when you lost a loved one. So
yes, and Mr. Batista, yourself lost your daughter as well. So
I have not
you have
recovered
an appreciation of
I have
what
not
we
recovered
face.
from that, because that was my heart, that was my backbone. So I know how it is. So let me know when the funeral arrangements, and I'll come and show my face.
Yes, absolutely. Senator Sinclair and Mr. Batiste, thank you for appearing on this week's edition of the Bubb Report. We will be certainly having a follow-up conversation following the government's announcement of its plan, because I think it really needs a proper interrogation and ventilation. So, gentlemen, thank you for appearing on this week's edition of the program.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Viewers and listeners, this is the Bubb Report. Of course, we are just joined there by our former Agriculture Minister, Mr. Michael Batiste, who is also leader of the opposition. The food security situation, discussing agriculture in Grenada in the wake of Hurricane Beryl. Of course, on behalf of the producers of the program, I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bubb, wishing everyone a pleasant week. Take care. Bye-bye.
We seek the truth.
Would you be handing your resignation to the Minister of Culture tomorrow, sir?
No, I will not.
The leader of the opposition, you have accused your government, sir, of using the Grenada Development Bank to facilitate the financing of personal loans for certain government ministers.
The other side is in no position to talk about those issues, and I will leave it there.
We discover new perspectives.
You know his leadership style, and so many are saying, why are you coming now to talk about those issues?
Now is the time to speak. You have the right to decide who will take over.
And you met with Dr. Mitchell, and perhaps you might want to confirm what that meeting was about in your response. But
Dr. Mitchell, like myself, are Grenadians.
We ask the right questions.
Why was there no report on the work done of the commission? And how is this new committee different from the commission that was initially established back in 2022? So who are these elements that are using you?
I'm disappointed in my political leader.
And why is that animating those political conversations now?
This is a very interesting question.
The Bubb Report with Dr. Kellon Bubb. Thought-provoking, truthful, unbiased, and truly original reporting.
Hi everyone. Thanks for checking out the Bubb Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG 10 throughout the Caribbean. Thanks for watching.